Hello and welcome to Mishnah concept number 8 and number 9. In these Mishnah concepts, we're going to be learning a basic rule about cooking on Shabbat. Everyone knows Mishnah concept number 8, that we may not cook on Shabbat. Even adjusting the fire or stirring the pot is considered cooking. Now you probably knew that you can't adjust the fire on Shabbat, but did you know that if a pot is on the fire, you can't even stick a spoon inside and stir it, because that will help the food in the pot get evenly cooked by the heat. Now, Mishnah concept number 9 is something maybe you're not so familiar with. So since you're not allowed to cook, in order to make sure we do not cook on Shabbat, the Rabbanan, that's the sages of the Mishnah, decreed that we may not leave food on the fire unless the fire is covered. A common way of doing this is by taking a metal plate called in Yiddish language a blech, a metal cover sheet that you put on top of the flame so that it just gets the metal hot, and you put the pot on there for it to cook. In order for it to be a good cover on our modern ovens, we have to make sure that the controls of the oven are covered also, which is why they manufacture special Shabbat hot plates, Shabbat blechs, which sort of look like this, like a metal sheet with a fold-down cover to go over the knobs of your oven, right? Because a lot of modern ovens have control knobs in the front, and they have the burners over here with a fire. So what you do is you take your metal sheet and you cover over the flame and the control knobs, and then you can leave the food from before Shabbat as long as you cover the fire, and when you need the food, you can take it off the metal plate and use it. And we're going to learn about different laws about what, if you want to put it back, can you put it back, how cooked does the food have to be. A lot of these laws will be discussed throughout the rest of Masechet Shabbat as we continue learning. Mishnah Yud in Perek Aleph of Mishnayot Shabbat begins. Ein solin basar, we cannot roast meat, batzal, onions, beya, eggs, ela kadei sheyitzolu miba'od yom, unless these items will be roasted fully while it is still daytime. Commentaries on the bottom tell us that you don't even have to have it fully roasted. It could even be what's called Kimachal ben Drusai. Ben Drusai was, the Gemara says, a famous highway robber. He used to always be running from the police, and he would be eating his food 1/3, the shlish bishul, 1/3 cooked. So if your food is 1/3 cooked, then you can leave it in the oven as Shabbat begins. Ein notnin pat letanur. You cannot put bread into an oven im chashecha, right before dark, right before it gets Shabbat begins. Velo charara al gabe gechalim, and not like like a cold cake or some type of a. They used to make like a bread on top of the coals. Ela kadei shekarmu paneha miba'od yom. Unless there is enough time that the crust, the outer crust of this bread will be formed, meaning it's going to get hard from the heat while it's still day. Right? Because we're worried that if you're going to put your food in the oven and Shabbat will begin and you're in a rush to get it cooked, you may start adjusting the temperature, adding fire, or moving it around in the oven. So the rabbis tell you that you must have the food completely ready to a certain degree that you already are not worried that it needs to be cooked anymore. Rabbi Eliezer says, "Kadei shikrom atachton shala it's enough if even the bottom, the part that's stuck on the oven, as you see this picture here, the bread, they used to stick it on the wall. So Rabbi Eliezer was very lenient. He said, even if there's enough time for the bottom to get hard, which that will happen first because it's attached to the heat, Rabbi Eliezer allows you to put it in the oven. However, the halacha does not follow Rabbi Eliezer, so you have to leave your food in the oven with long enough time that it's at least a third baked, if not fully baked, before Shabbat begins. So now that we know that we are not allowed to leave food cooking in the oven, even if you put it in before Shabbat, we're going to say a couple of exceptions in the Mishnah. And the exceptions are times when the rabbis were not concerned that anyone would adjust the temperature. One example is the Korban Pesach. It says the Mishnah Yud Aleph, Mishal Shalina Ta Pesach, you can lower the Pesach sacrifice, which was a lamb roasted over the fire, but tanur, into a tanur oven. A tanur oven is basically like a big cone with one opening in the top and a place in the bottom to make the fire. Im chashecha, right before dark. So you're basically allowing it to roast before dark. Now, didn't we just learn that you can't leave your food if it's not even a third cooked before Shabbat began? Well, this is an exception because the people, since the Korban Pesach needs to be roasted in a group, the people in the group, they're called the Bnei Chabura, the group that you're eating the Korban Pesach with, they will remind each other and make sure that you will not touch the temperature or touch the fire. Another example is you can light a wood pile on the medura, the bonfire of the Beit HaMoked. Now, what is the Beit HaMoked? Basically, in the Beit HaMikdash, the Kohanim were not allowed to wear shoes or socks. They would walk barefoot on a stone floor, and it would get very cold. In order to make sure the Kohanim would warm their feet, they would have a room called the Beit HaMoked, where they would light big piles of bonfires, big wooden fires, and they would allow, and the Kohanim would come in there to warm their feet so they don't get cold. Now, ordinarily, you wouldn't be allowed to light a fire right before Shabbat begins, because obviously it takes a long time. Anyone who's ever made a campfire knows that it takes a long time for the fire to get started. And even if you have your lighter fluid or whatever you use, people are always taking sticks and poking the fire to make the flame catch the wood better. And normally we would be concerned that you don't make campfires or any type of fires right before Shabbat begins, because we're worried that you're going to forget yourself and start poking the fire on Shabbat, which is not allowed. However, this room is an exception. In the Beit HaMoked, in the Beit HaMikdash, the Kohanim were so careful, they were so quick in their performance of mitzvot, that we know that as long as you started the fire before Shabbat, the Kohanim would not allow anybody to touch it on Shabbat. Now, ubagvulin, what about in the surrounding areas of Israel, not in the Beit HaMikdash? There's not enough time for that to happen. We are not going to allow you to make that fire, because it's going to be a good likelihood that you're going to want to adjust the logs on the fire to help it catch. Rabbi Yehuda said something very wise. Bepechamin, with charcoal, which is basically lighter fluid for those days. That charcoal is basically already burnt materials that, since it's already burnt, when you put the fire to it, it catches on right away, sort of like we do with lighter fluid, that we take the lighter fluid and we spray it on the wood, and you just put a match there and whoosh, it erupts in flame. Well, if you have something like that, kol shehu, any amount of time, even a little bit of time before Shabbat is okay to light your fire, because all you have to do is drop in a match and boom, your fire is started, and we're not concerned that you're going to need to adjust it on Shabbat because the fire is easy to start. Here's a picture of someone making a fire in a fireplace with some type of a charcoal. I just throw it in and it right away starts. If you don't have a charcoal, you have to make sure most of the pile can light.